This is the Ford Mustang Mach-E. The first thing people say to me is, this is not a Mustang, this is an SUV crossover and not a muscle car. And I agree with that, but I think we need to relearn the branding of Mustang. In my opinion, the brand Mustang holds much more cachet than the name Ford. And to excite people into getting into one of these, they wanted to land a haymaker by saying the electric Mustang. Yes, this is a 5-door crossover car that looks like it's designed for soccer games more so than the drag strip. No arguments here. But with my 4 days with this car, I really loved so many things about it, and I think there is some validation to using the name of Mustang. If this is your first time watching this channel, I'm not a car guy. I'm a tech guy who has a clean burning passion for electric cars. Now, my personal car is a Tesla Model 3 Performance, but I will leave those biases at the door. Naturally, I will make some comparisons, but I will be sure to separate those from the actual review. The Mach-E comes in 2 available battery sizes and either rear or all-wheel drive. The Mach-E is rated for up to 305 miles worth of range with the extended battery and rear-wheel drive. If you opted to go all-wheel drive, then you're looking at 270 miles worth of range. Now, I wasn't able to test the exact range with my limited time with the car, but according to some real-world reporting from owners, this is fairly accurate. Of course, it all depends on weather and the type of driving. The official EPA rating gave it a range between 211 and also 305. So to begin, there are 3 different driving modes, which are engaged, whisper, and unbridled. There are tooltips next to each one explaining the different modes, but it wasn't really apparent until you read that. I do find that unbridled had the best driving experience for me, and it still didn't feel overly aggressive. It actually felt just right. Whisper is like an eco mode where it's much slower acceleration, and engage is just the sweet spot between the two, which was an okay driving experience. Now, speaking of whisper, this car is pretty silent when driving. You know, you may have the occasional whine as you're ramping up to speed. However, if you've never been in an electric vehicle, or even if you've been in an electric vehicle before, I would say it had limited road noise and it sounded pretty good. You can add fake sound from the menus just by toggling option on, and it gives it a much fuller feeling, but for me, I just rather not have it. You know, when dealing with range in the winter, it can change significantly. Running cabin heat and heating the battery are huge sources of energy usage. Some cars come equipped with a heat pump to help with this. However, Ford did not put one in the Mach-E, so that's something we should be watching coming the winter. I'm not sure if Ford has another method of keeping the battery at the right temp, but of course, we will see in the winter. Every model also has fast charging capabilities. Now, when you buy the car, it does come with a couple of charging solutions. You have a Ford mobile charger, and that can add up to 30 miles of range per night with a standard 120 volt outlet, or you can get about 80% of battery life overnight with a 240 volt outlet. In my house, I have a 240 volt outlet that I added, so I was able to take advantage of the quick charge that gave me around 30 miles of range per hour of charge. You can also purchase the official charge station from Ford for $799. And that gives you 32 miles per hour of charging. And also there's some additional features within the Ford Pass app. I wasn't able to test that functionality out all the way, but within the app, you should have the ability to add scheduling charging, turn off and on charging, and also the app acts as a key, so you don't need to use the keys to access the car. You can just use the phone. In the car, on the infotainment system, you can set up charging schedules. So if you are on a time of charging plan, so let's say like after midnight, you get a cheaper rate, then what you can do is in the car, tell it do not charge until after midnight. You can set up all sorts of schedules depending on time, depending on day, and all those things. And that should make it really helpful in the winter, getting you the ideal temperature in the car. And that helps so you don't have to crank the heat as soon as you get in the car. And that's gonna really help with range. And also it's gonna help with battery. It should keep the battery at a good temperature too, so your car is not struggling to keep the battery warm. If you want to know more about charging, I can leave that information down below. I will put some resources there if you want to dig into it. Let's talk about design. I think it turns heads, not just because it has a Mustang logo, but it's a well-designed car. I love the lights around the vehicle. The front LEDs, the back tail lights, and the animations the lights do just looks really good. It has nice wheels and blacked out trim. Then this front grille is just a really, really nice, aggressive look. I think for many people, they won't be able to look past it not being a classic Mustang, but I do think this design and some of the elements of it really calls back to the classic Mustang just a little bit. The Mach-E also has a pretty large frunk, allowing you to store things in the front of the car and also the back of the car. That's the one big advantage of electric vehicles. They have the opportunity to give you a front trunk too, which is called the frunk for slang. Now the interior of the car is where you spend most of the time with the vehicle, so this is really important. The interior of the Mach-E looks premium, and it feels that way too. From the stitching all over the interior, like the seats and the doors and the dash, to the premium B&O audio system. I like to focus on the tech inside the car because that's something that calls true to me. So what I want to draw your attention to is the infotainment system right here in the middle. Now, just like other EVs, this has a huge screen. This one is 15.5 inches and it's big. But sadly, I do feel the information is cluttered and important stuff sometimes is tucked away and hard to find. I found myself struggling to use the UI a little bit, and it sort of had a steeper learning curve that I would have liked. Now, as a person who loves tech, I can usually pick up on a UI quickly, but this did not have that intuitiveness. Now, this is my first time using the Sync 4 system, and I'm not sure if this is all Sync information or Mustang stuff, but for me, it was just a little bit difficult. There is a physical wheel at the bottom which allows you to access the volume quickly, and there are physical buttons sprinkled in, like for HVAC and hazards and lights and a few other essentials, which is really good to see. I am happy that there are some physical buttons, but the main control is going to be on the screen. The reverse camera is very clear and wide with additional angles like over the top and sides. You can even zoom in closer to the ground when you're backing in somewhere for some fine-tuned parking. And I think that's kind of the coolest feature for me. Also, when turning and you get really close to an object while parking, the camera kicks on so you can be sure that you'll make that turn. And also, when you put the car in drive, the reverse cameras and the cameras around the car are still on a little bit until you start getting up to speed, which is just another nice safety feature. This isn't the only screen in the car. There is a traditional cluster located behind the wheel. I mean, it's not too traditional, it's all digital, but you know what I mean. This gives you speed, status of headlights, and a few other things that you may want to know. The screen is very bright, and I find it easy to see in sunlight, and also at night it dims down nicely too. It's just very pleasing to the eye. Now, as far as some of my favorite features, it does have wireless CarPlay and Android Auto. Although for me, the wireless CarPlay only worked a few times when I used it, but after that, it had issues connecting wirelessly. I tried 3 different iPhones and I had the same problem. I ended up using the cable for the duration of my demo, which isn't a big deal because it actually charges and does it at the same time, so it's okay. Now, speaking of charging, there are 2 wireless charging pads located under the infotainment system, but for my iPhone 12, it was shift while driving, and then I get a message saying that my phone is no longer charging because it's not located on the coils. Now, there are little grids that will do its best to keep the phone in place, but for smaller phones, it does shift a little bit, but when I had my 12 Pro Max, it was locked in, didn't move at all. There are also USB-C or USB-A port for CarPlay and Android Auto, but as I mentioned before, it does charge as well. Beyond a few annoyances and just getting comfortable with it, I really do like the infotainment system. The Apple CarPlay makes it an easy system to use, and even if you don't want to use Apple CarPlay, the built-in map software is still pretty good. You can even locate some charging stations nearby if you need to charge on the go. Although it doesn't give a ton of data about the charging stations, like the price and what the actual business is, or if they're even open to the public. And this leads me to one of the biggest disadvantages of any other electric car company today, not named Tesla. The over-the-road charging infrastructure still isn't there. It is getting better, but it's still far behind. This is a great day-to-day car, but taking it on a cross-country trip, or even if I want to take it, in Michigan, we say up north for 300 or 400 miles, without proper planning and confirming the details of charging speeds and things like that, it will make the trip really hard. Now with Tesla, I know where the charging stations are, what speed they'll charge at, and how many stalls are open prior to even leaving. So there is a ways to go when it comes to over-the-road charging, and hopefully it continues to get better. The Mach-E is Ford's electric flagship, and it's a great one. I think this car is geared for that person who's ready for that electric car, but doesn't want to join the rogue Tesla. They want something more established, more refined, and more seemingly dependable. This car exceeded my expectations on all fronts, and this proves that Ford can make a fun electric car that has the build quality of a classic car. So people always ask me the magic question, is this car better than a Tesla Model Y? Because these two cars go head to head, and I think they're different cars. I think a Tesla is very unrefined. It feels like a piece of tech on wheels, where the Mach-E feels like a car that just happens to be electric. It has the styling of a really nice car. It has the interior. It has all these things going for it. It just happens to be electric, where the Tesla is just like all this technology on wheels. But when it comes to car stuff, I wouldn't say it's great. Interior isn't good. Build quality isn't great. The glass is very soft. The paint is really bad. So I think when you compare the cars head to head and you check off what it does better, the Mach-E is just a better car overall. Now, am I trading in my Tesla for one? No, I'm not doing that. But when it's time for me to get a new car, the Mach-E is going to be on there near the top of the list. Obviously, there's gonna be more cars coming out, but for me, the Mach-E checks so many boxes, it would be silly for me to ignore that. Anyways, guys, those were my thoughts. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and let me know if you have an electric car or you're still waiting for one, or what cars have piqued your interest, and maybe I can do my best to check them out. Kevin the Tech Ninja, have a good day. Talk to you guys later. Peace.